Well, it's a good Sunday already. I am so excited about this. You know, it's All-Star Week here in Kansas City, but I am excited about this morning and what God has for us. We're in the middle of a sermon series called God's Mythbusters, and really it's a takeoff from the Discovery Channel TV show and program where we look at common held beliefs, ideas, things that people think they think, and we put them to the test. And we say, are these really real? Are they really true? Or are they just things that we've been taught or come to believe or whatever? And so far in this series, actually it's a reprise. I did this series similar to this last summer, and this is kind of a reprise. But on this time, we've looked at things like let your conscience be your guide. We said, you know, sometimes our conscience can be pretty unreliable. Our conscience is only as good as the information that's been put into it. And so our conscience can let us down. Really, instead of our conscience being our guide, we ought to let God's Word be our guide. On Father's Day, a couple of weeks ago, my son Ben helped me preach it, and we talked about godly parenting equals guarantees godly kids. And we said, you know what? We've known some really, really godly parents who've had really, really rotten kids. And so we can't always equate godly parenting with godly kids because those kids have an opportunity for themselves to accept Christ or not. And so we talked a little bit about that. Last week, in the mornings in this service, the 11 o'clock service was our Vacation Bible School program, but in this service, we talked about bearing our cross. You've heard people say that phrase when they're going through a trial in their life or trouble of one sort or another. They say, well, this is just the cross I have to bear. And we talked about, rather, that the cross is our glory, not something that we have to bear. It's our hope. It's our source of help and healing. It's because of the cross that we can rejoice. That's why we can sing, oh, the wonderful cross, because Jesus went to the cross. We can have help and hope. That's what we talked about last week. Well, this week, we're tackling another one of these myths, and that is God brings good luck. Do you think that? Do you think God brings good luck? Oh, you might not say it exactly that way, but do you really sort of think it? Do you think that if you do what's right, if you follow God, I mean really follow God, not just kind of half-hearted follow God, but if you really follow God, you're faithful, then for the most part, you can, kick back, relax, sip some lemonade, and be all right, that God's going to take care of you. Do you believe that? Scoundrels, we know that they're going to get what's coming to them. Bad people, rapists, murderers, all the rest, they can't count on God to help them. We understand that. But if you serve Jesus, you try your best, you work really hard, I'm not saying you'll become a millionaire, but good things will come to you. Do you believe that? Well, I hate to break this to you. And I know. This isn't a formula for building, a huge crowd or a big church. People a lot more often like to hear the message, serve Jesus, get rich. And there's been churches that have preached that exact message, and the pastors have gotten rich from doing it. But I'll be honest, that's not what the Bible says at all. Now, to be sure, there are passages in the Scripture that speak of the righteous receiving temporal blessings. And I know some wonderfully godly believers who've been blessed materially, and they have in turn blessed others. They have lived by John Wesley's model. John Wesley spoke a sermon one time, The Use of Money. And in that sermon, he talked about gaining all you can, saving all you can, giving all you can. And I've known people who've lived by that philosophy. And they have made a lot of money, and they have given a lot of money away, and they've blessed thousands, literally thousands of people. But a strong case can be made that following Jesus is just as likely, maybe sometimes even more likely, to cause, I know this is hard to hear, troubles. Following Jesus can get us into trouble. I quoted passages last week in that sermon on the cross. And we talked about how being a Christian isn't always easy. And we looked at that passage where Jesus says, if you're going to be my follower, you take up your cross and follow me. And Jesus also said, blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you, insult you, and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. That doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. Maybe you have thicker skin than me, but I don't like when people insult me or reject me or exclude me. That doesn't sound like you've got a lot of good luck when that's going on. To the Philippians, from a Roman dungeon, Paul said, for it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only that you believe in him, but also that you suffer for him. I say if you're suffering, whether it's for Jesus or any other reason, you don't have good luck. You've got bad luck. Just ask Stephen, first Christian martyr, Stephen, that's Stephen. Ask him if following Jesus brings good luck. This is what the Bible says about Stephen. While they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he fell on his knees and cried out, Lord, do not hold this sin against him. Not a lot of good luck there. Just ask James, St. James, James the son of Zebedee, James, John's brother, that James. This is how the Bible describes what happened to James. King Herod arrested some. Who's King Herod? I don't know. That's really King Jared gave them all a Subway sandwich. No. That is not what happened. I don't know where in the world that came from. King Herod, that's the guy. He arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. Oh my goodness, I'm having trouble speaking. He had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. Doesn't sound like a lot of good luck right there. If you were to read the book of Hebrews, there's a group of people that the author of Hebrews describes that would absolutely say, following God does not bring good luck. This is how he describes them. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and holes in the ground. That doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. The author says that the world was unworthy of them, and yet they struggled through all these things. Let me just get this out there. Jesus is not a rabbit's foot. He is not a four-leaf clover. He's not a good luck charm that you can stick in your pocket and say, man, I got Jesus, now everything is made in the shade. But I've known people that think that way in so many words. Guy comes to church, becomes a follower of Jesus, starts coming to church, starts, maybe even putting some money into the offering plate, tithing a little bit, and he thinks, well, God ought to bless me. I'm coming to church now, I'm tithing. But then something happens. Maybe he loses his job. Maybe his kids get sick. Maybe the engine blows up in his car. Maybe all three of those things happen all at once. That seems to be the way it works. And he says, hey, God, what's going on here? I started following you. I started coming to church, started tithing, and now everything's going crazy in my life. I was better off when I wasn't following you. Do you know anybody who's ever said that? Have you ever said that, or at least thought it? Do you remember when Job was going through all his struggles, Job in the Old Testament? Do you remember what his wife tells him? His wife went up to him and said, curse God and die. Little Miss Sunshine she was. Curse God and die. And Job's friends didn't offer him much better advice. They were convinced that Job must have done something so awful, so horrible, so terrible, that even though he put on this front that he was righteous, goody two-shoes type of guy, but he must have done something awful to garnish such a terrible misfortune in his life. Because in so many words, they were convinced that God must bring good luck. If you serve God, you follow God, you're righteous, then automatically you're going to have good things happen to you. But if you're not, then obviously you're going to have bad things happen to you. There's a guy in the Old Testament, a guy by the name of Asaph. Asaph was a poet, and he wrote some of the Psalms in the book of Psalms. And Asaph was struggling with this issue. He couldn't figure out why the wicked seemed to just, do so great, and while the righteous seemed to have troubles. He was dealing with this and grappling with that age-old question, why do bad things happen to good people? And in Psalm 73, he gets really, really honest. I'm going to read it from the Message version because I really think it just hits really close to home and drives home the point. This is how the Message version reads Psalm 73, beginning with verse 11. Asaph says, what's going on here? Is God out to lunch? Nobody's tending the store? The wicked are getting by with everything. They have it made, piling up riches. I've been stupid to play by the rules. What has it gotten me? A long run of bad luck, that's what. A slap in the face every time I walk out the door. Have you ever felt that way? What's the use? God, you're not answering my prayers, and life is getting worse and worse. You thought that way? Don't feel too guilty. Look around. Probably most of us at some point have at least had those thoughts cross through our mind. But Asaph didn't do what Job's wife said. He didn't just curse God and die. He writes in that same 73rd Psalm that he entered into the sanctuary of God. And it hit him. Like rays of sunshine coming over him. For the first time, he really grasped that we're just kind of passing through this old earth. And the wicked, the things that they have, they're just temporary. And Asaph had a vision of their terrible and sudden end. And he realized that there's more to life than just the 70, 80, 90 years that we spend on old planet Earth. And he came to this conclusion in verse 21. When I was beleaguered and bitter, totally consumed by envy, I was totally ignorant, a dumb ox in your presence. I'm still in your presence. And you've taken my hand. You wisely and tenderly lead me, and then you bless me. You're all I want in heaven. You're all I want on earth. When my skin sags and my bones get brittle, God is rock firm and faithful. You know, we got some folks who, I don't know, I got to be careful how I say it, but their skins are sagging and their bones are brittle. Yesterday, I was at the nursing home. We have a service every Saturday morning. Wayne and Dottie Bartlett lead the service at the Garden Villa Nursing Home. And every couple of months, I go over and preach, and we have communion, and that was yesterday. And so they were my guinea pigs. I preached this sermon to them yesterday. And it was a great group. We had probably 39 people. I'm sure the youngest one in that crowd was probably not under 75 years old. Their skin was sagging. Their bones are brittle. But they're such a great group. I wish you could meet my one friend, John, that's there. He's there every week. He's a big African-American guy, and he's in a wheelchair. And he has the lowest bass voice I think I've ever heard. They have a choir, the group does. And so they sing, and John sits like close to where I'm sitting. And so I hear him sing that bass, those bass parts as the choir sings in the service. And it's awesome. And I tell you all that to say, those folks who are there, 75 years is probably the spring chicken, and they're all there, saggy skin and brittle bones. But they know this, God's been faithful to them. God has been rock hard and faithful. Now I get why people sometimes get sucked into this prosperity type of message. I get it. It sounds great, really great. Follow Jesus, strike it rich, yahoo! It even seems to make sense sometimes. We think, well, if God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, then surely, he could spare a heifer or two for me. My kids are in trouble, I help them. Your kids are in trouble, you help them. God's the great Father, then surely he can, if you're using gold for pavement up in heaven, can he spare a few, pavement for me? And sometimes people who get caught up into this type of thinking, they even like to quote Jesus. Because in John 10:10, Jesus said, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. The King James Version says, I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. And they think, aha, the abundant life, that's what we're talking about. That sounds like, the abundant life sounds like the good life. That sounds like the trouble-free life. That sounds like, I've got it made in the shade with Jesus life. But is that what Jesus was talking about in John 10:10? I don't think Jesus was talking about greater ease or prosperity or protection from Job-like trials. Remember, Jesus himself was completely, totally in God's will. The only person that has ever walked on this planet who got it 100% right. And he died with nothing to his name on an old rugged cross. That's what we talked about last Sunday. So in this passage of John 10:10, Jesus is talking about having life abundantly and living life to the full. He's talking about, it's in the context of him laying down his life for the sheep, which is in contrast to the thief that wants to come and destroy our lives. Jesus is talking about salvation, pure, simple, glorious salvation. That's the abundant life. He's not talking about some kind of earthly rewards and sipping on champagne when we're going through life. He's saying the abundant life in this context has nothing to do with earthly pleasures and as the world views success, but rather it's eternity. We can have abundant life forever and ever. I see this mentality of God being a good luck charm all the time. Those who just kind of give a passing appreciation to God. And hopefully that'll bring them some sort of good luck. If you watch sports, you see it. A guy cussing up and down the basketball court, trash talking the whole time. He gets fouled, goes to the free throw line. What's he do? He makes the sign of the cross. Really? Or the soldier who keeps around his neck a cross, hoping that somehow that will protect him while his locker is full of pornography. A family in the suburbs that has on their coffee table a great big old Bible sitting right there in the middle. I think it's there just to keep that coffee table from floating away because they haven't opened that book in years and years and years. And the mentality in all those things is, what can it hurt? A little bit of God might bring me some luck. Don't want to upset the big guy upstairs. I got to hedge my bets. It never works. Never. Just ask the Israelites. They tried it. They thought their pedigree, their sacrifices, the fact that the temple was in their capital city, they thought that was all the luck they needed. And besides, they were better off than their neighbors. They were worse than them. Bear in mind, the whole time they were turning to foreign gods over and over again. They frequently oppressed the poor and the widows and the orphans. They pretty much did everything that God said not to do. And so to their total shock and amazement, their empty religious rituals got them nothing. Well, I take that back. It got them something. It got them a one-way trip to Babylon where their best and brightest were carted off as slaves. It happens today. Not the free trip to Babylon part, but the idea that if we just do the right religious things, if we get baptized, if we kind of go through the religious motions, if we toss some money into the plate, if we volunteer every now and then we've kept our God bases covered. I got to tell you, rather than giving us a little bit of luck or somehow winking at our sin, God says, I don't want your half-hearted commitments. What do you think I am? You think I'm a fool? I don't want that. In fact, I want nothing to do with you. In fact, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. That's what he told the church at Laodicea. Do you remember that church? They looked around at all the great stuff that they had. And by that first century standards, they had a lot of great stuff. And they said, man, it works. God is a good luck charm. If we say the right things, even though we don't always believe them, if we go through the right rituals, even though we're working on our to-do list while we're there, then we're good to go. But again, God can't be fooled, and this is what he told them. He says, I know your deeds. You're neither cold nor hot. I wish you were either one or the other, so because you're lukewarm, neither hot or cold, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. You say, I'm rich, I've acquired wealth, I do not need a thing. But you don't realize that you're wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, naked. So if a half-hearted, simple nod to God doesn't do much good, in fact, probably does its worse. And if somebody who's a good person like Job or Asaph still has problems in their life, why bother? Is that a good question to ask in church? I mean, if being devout and faithful and trying to your best doesn't save you from having troubles in your life, why bother? Well, there's a great psalm that David wrote that I think answers that question. When he wrote this psalm, David was going through a particularly difficult time in his life. And it wasn't because of the Bathsheba affair. He went through a tough time because of that. This had nothing to do with that. There were enemies that were attacking him. His friends had turned their back on him. In fact, he was under fire. It seemed like from all sides. Life was not going very, very well. People were mad. And this is how David writes it in the 31st Psalm. Be merciful to me, Lord, for I'm in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak because of all my enemies. I am the utter contempt of my neighbors, an object of dread to my closest friends. Those who see me on the street flee from me. I am forgotten as though I were dead. I become like broken pottery, for I hear many whispering terror on every side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life. Can you relate with David a little bit there? I feel like I'm a broken pot. I feel like everything is just piled up against me and I'm crushed. Even my friends, they don't even want to be around me anymore. I don't blame them. Ever feel like that? Life is rough. Then hear David's declaration, right on the heels of just just pouring out his soul to the Lord. Verses 14 and 15 says, but I trust in you, Lord. I say you are my God. My hands are in your time. Why bother? God hasn't forgotten you. This whole earth, it's not the end. Our time is in God's hands. One of the great questions that Jesus asks is in Mark chapter 8, verse 36, where he reminds us of that truth. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? Jesus is saying, just think about it. You're going to spend a whole lot more time in eternity than you are here on earth. Don't worry about gaining the whole world. Worry about what's going on in your heart and life. Worry about how you're treating others. Worry about those type of things. Not all the wealth and good luck that might come your way. You see, you can have the best that this whole world has. You can gain the whole world. But if you don't have Jesus, you lose. This week on Tuesday, I officiated at the memorial service for longtime Central member Rosalie Kelly. I don't know if you had a chance to meet Rosalie. She's been in a nursing home care facility for the last couple of years. Rosalie was a beautiful, petite lady. But don't take that to mean she wasn't strong. Rosalie was very, very strong. God gave her strength because she didn't have it easy in her life. She had 4 children, and I don't know how old the youngest was. Eddie was not all that old, elementary school age, when her husband was working on the car, and the jack went out, and the car crushed him. And so then she had to raise those 4 kids. This is back in the 60s, on her own. And she had a number of things that you would say, if we went through the litany of all the things, the heartache in Rosalie's life, you would say, wow, that's a lot of heartache. One time, her and her husband and Carl and Norma Jean Snyder were in an airplane. She was a pilot, and they were in an airplane. I think her husband was piloting it at that time, though. And they were in an airplane, and the engine conked out while they were up in the air. As Norma Jean told me the story, she said, everybody was talking, conversation going back and forth, everyone having a great time, and the engine went out, and then it was like, silence. That's what'll happen when the engine conks out on a single-engine airplane. And Norma Jean says they were over a lake, and she didn't know how to swim. Got quiet quick. But thankfully, there was an abandoned airstrip not far away, and they were able to glide to that airstrip, and everybody walked away fine. But Rosalie, she had a lot of struggles. And just last year, her son Eddie, who is younger than me, was involved in an ATV accident, killed when he ran into a tree. I remember last year we were all worried for Rosalie because she's so frail. I thought, oh my goodness, how's Rosalie going to make it through this terrible, terrible tragedy? But she made it through, just like she made it through all the other tragedies. She was strong in the Lord. So Tuesday was her funeral service right here. I was standing right here. And sometimes during funeral services, I like when it's somebody like Rosalie. I shouldn't give you preacher secrets. When it's somebody I know, I don't want to just have the rote funeral that I can do off the top of my head. I try to find a Bible verse that speaks of that person and their character and who they are. And so I quote it in the sermon. I quoted the Proverbs 31, which is about a devout woman, a faithful woman. That's a great passage. But really, the verse, I kept going back to it. The verse that I kept thinking of whenever I thought of Rosalie was that passage, was the master's words in the story that Jesus told. In Matthew 25, in the parable of the talents, you remember the master went away, and three guys were given different sums of money, and the 2 guys that did well, the 5-talent guy, the 2-talent guy. Remember what the master said to him? Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many. When I thought of that, I thought, man, that's Rosalie. Life hadn't always been easy. If you were to ask her, Rosalie, did life bring you good luck? She could tell you a million reasons why it hadn't. But like David, she would have been able to say, I trust in God. He's my God. My days are in his hands. And because of that, she has heard those glorious, wonderful words from the Lord. well done, Rosalie. Well done. Listen, you're not guaranteed good luck in this world. When you follow Jesus, sometimes it brings you bad luck, quite frankly. Jesus said it. People will persecute you. They may reject you. They may toss you out. But the good news is, this old life, it's not all just about this. We're going to spend a whole lot more time in eternity than the 50, 60, 70, 80 people like I talked to yesterday, 90 years. And the question is, how are you living your life today? Are you living it to please the Lord today? Are you living it so that you will hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant? That's what it's all about. Pastor Andy, let's go back and sing that song that we just sang, Jesus Be the Center. And as we sing that song, it may be that you've just got a lot of stuff on your plate right now. Maybe you're feeling a little bit like Job. You know, it seems like there's trouble on all sides. As we sing this song, if you want to just come down here and pray, just give those things back over to Jesus. Say, Lord, it's weighing heavy. I've got trouble on all sides. The enemy's saying, just like Job's wife, curse God and die. Forget about it. But rather, I want you to be the center. I want to be able to say like David, even though all this stuff is going around, I trust in God. He's my hope. My times are in His hands. Why don't you stand with me and let's sing this. And if you want to pray down here, there's nothing magical in these altars. It's just a good place to pray. If life is weighing heavy, I'd encourage you to pray this morning. Let's sing this song through.
Jesus.